The war for Serenity Point began not with a bang, but with a $750 invoice for a rowboat and a shattered promise to my daughter. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I've always found it's more satisfying when served with a court, summons, a foreclosure notice, and the public humiliation of a tyrant. If you're hiding from your own neighborhood despot, wondering if it's worth the fight, lean in closer. This isn't just a story. It's a playbook. My name is Arthur Vance, and 6 months ago, my world consisted of two things: my 15-year-old daughter, Lila, and the hollow echo her mother's absence left in our lives. Eleanor was gone, and with her, the color had drained from our world. I had spent 2 decades in the brutal world of corporate turnarounds, buying failing companies and breathing life back into them, a skill that earned me an early retirement and a fortune I no longer cared about. The only solace we found was on the water, in the quiet companionship of casting a line, a ritual Eleanor had cherished. So I bought us a new start, a house in Serenity Point, a community built around a pristine, 5-acre body of water they called Whispering Lake. The realtor had glossed over the homeowners association, calling it a formality. Her only warning was a tight-lipped comment about the board president, Victoria Sterling, being passionate about maintaining community standards. I would soon learn that passionate was a polite word for despotic. Our first real Saturday, there, Lila and I pushed our small wooden rowboat, a project we'd finished together in the garage, into the calm waters of the lake. For the first time in a year, I heard Lila laugh, a genuine, unburdened sound, as she reeled in a small sunfish. That sound was shattered by a voice slicing through the air like breaking glass. Unregistered watercraft are strictly forbidden on this lake. Victoria Sterling stood on the shore, a vision in tailored linen, her face a mask of condescending disapproval. Beside her stood Brenda Croft, her ever-present second-in-command, clutching a clipboard like a weapon. I rowed us to the dock, trying to keep the peace. "Good morning. I'm Arthur Vance from the old Miller place." Victoria's eyes swept over our modest boat and tackle box with disdain. "Mr. Vance, your welcoming packet explicitly outlined the rules regarding lake usage. This is a violation of Bylaw 17, Section C. The fine is $750, and the boat must be removed immediately." Lila flinched, her brief moment of joy evaporating. "There must be a misunderstanding," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "This lake was the primary reason we moved here. Perhaps you're accustomed to a different sort of community," Victoria replied, her tone dripping with insinuation. "Here we value aesthetics and order. We don't allow just anyone to turn our pristine lake into a public fishing hole." That was when I knew this wasn't about a boat. It was about control. We packed up in silence. Later that day, I found the fine taped to my door. I also found something else. A burning, familiar fire I hadn't felt since my days dismantling corrupt corporate boards. Victoria Sterling had just made the gravest mistake of her meticulously managed life. She had made it personal. My first call was to my old network, but my first real breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Old Man Fitzwilliam, the community's semi-retired groundskeeper, saw me studying the lake's perimeter. He'd been there since the first foundations were poured. "She's trying to squeeze the joy out of this place," he muttered, leaning on his rake. "This lake ain't even hers. It belongs to Crestwood Holdings, the developers. Their lease to the HOA is up in 3 months. Heard they're in a bad way financially." This was the crack in the armor I needed. I spent the next week in a deep dive, pulling public records and making discreet inquiries. I discovered Victoria's boutique lifestyle consultancy was a facade for a highly leveraged real estate company. She was in debt up to her perfectly coiffed hair, and she had a plan. She was negotiating to buy Whispering Lake from the struggling Crestwood Holdings, not for the community, but for herself. Her vision wasn't a pristine lake. It was a row of luxury townhomes built right on the shore, a project that would net her millions and save her from financial ruin. The new restrictive rules were designed to slowly choke off resident access, making her eventual privatization of the lake an easier pill for the community to swallow. I soon found I wasn't the only one chafing under Victoria's rule. I met George, Alistair, a retired constitutional lawyer with a mind like a steel trap after he received a fine for his flagpole being 2 inches too tall. He introduced me to Marcus Thorne, a former bank comptroller who had been systematically tracking the HOA's bizarre spending for years. We formed a small secret council of war in George's book-lined study. Her enforcement is targeted, Marcus explained, pointing to a spreadsheet that glowed on his laptop. Fines are disproportionately issued to new residents, minorities, and anyone who questions her authority. The properties that eventually sell out of frustration, they're often snapped up by LLCs that, after 3 or 4 shell corporations, trace right back to Victoria. Our most valuable asset became Clara Jenkins, a timid widow on the HOA board who was tired of being Victoria's rubber stamp. Terrified of retaliation, she would slip notes into my mailbox, detailing closed-door meetings and Victoria's plans. It was Clara who confirmed Victoria's endgame. She was planning a special assessment on all homeowners to fund vital lake maintenance, a war chest she would actually use as a down payment to buy the lake herself. As our secret coalition grew, so did Victoria's paranoia. The harassment campaign intensified. Brenda Croft became a permanent fixture on our street, measuring lawns with a ruler and photographing trash cans left out 10 minutes too long. But Victoria's fatal overreach was targeting Lila. She convinced the school administration that Lila's participation in a regional science fair with a project on freshwater ecosystems constituted a conflict of interest due to my ongoing disputes with the community. It was a baseless, cruel attack designed to hurt me through my daughter. That night, seeing Lila's tear-streaked face, my calculated strategy turned into a crusade. While Victoria was busy bullying school children and measuring grass, I was on the phone with David Chen, a vice president at the beleaguered Crestwood Holdings. Her offer, he confided, was $400,000 with complicated financing. I offered him $500,000, all cash, closing in 5 business days. The entity on the paperwork was an anonymous trust I created, the Eleanor Vance Memorial Foundation. As the deal closed, a delicious sense of anticipation settled over me. Victoria was about to host her magnum opus, a lavish, catered, groundbreaking ceremony for a new community pavilion on the lake's shore, the first step in her development plan. She had invited local politicians and press. It was the perfect stage. The day of the ceremony was beautiful. Victoria stood at a podium, bathed in sunlight, delivering a flowery speech about her vision for a more exclusive, more valuable serenity. Point. As she held up a golden shovel for the photographers, I made my entrance, flanked by George Alistair and a certified process server. I waited for the applause to die down before I stepped forward. "A wonderful speech, Victoria," I said, my voice carrying easily across the manicured lawn. "But I'm afraid you're digging in the wrong spot." Confusion rippled through the crowd. "Arthur, this is a private event," she hissed. "It is indeed a private event on private property," I agreed. "My private property." I nodded to the process server, who calmly handed her a thick envelope. "This is a cease and desist letter, and this," I said, holding up a file-stamped deed, "is the title to this lake and all surrounding land. The Eleanor Vance Memorial Foundation, of which I am the sole trustee, finalized the purchase from Crestwood Holdings 2 days ago. Your lease expired this morning. This event is now a party for trespassers." The color drained from Victoria's face. The golden shovel clattered to the ground. "You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises," I announced to the stunned crowd, "before the authorities are called." The aftermath was glorious chaos. Victoria's political allies vanished, her financing collapsed, and her reputation was left in smoking ruins. But my plan was far from over. I didn't want to be a tyrant. I wanted to dismantle a tyranny. I immediately sent a letter to every resident, explaining the situation and inviting them to a community meeting. There, I laid out my offer. I would transfer ownership of the lake to a new, democratically elected community trust. But first, the old HOA had to be dissolved, its bylaws rewritten from scratch with term limits and transparent financial oversight and a full independent audit of the last 5 years of Victoria's reign had to be conducted. The audit, led by Marcus, uncovered years of embezzlement and fraud. Victoria had been using HOA funds to landscape her friends' properties and pay for her own legal fees. Faced with criminal charges and financial ruin, Victoria made one last desperate move. In the dead of night, my new security cameras caught her and Brenda Croft attempting to sabotage the lake's small dam, a pathetic attempt to create an environmental crisis that only her development plan could solve. Fitzwilliam, making his early morning rounds, spotted their car and called me moments before they could do irreparable damage. The video footage was the final nail in her coffin. Today, Serenity Point is run by a council of residents, not rulers. Clara Jenkins, no longer timid, is the new president. The lake, now officially named Eleanor's Lake, is the heart of our community, with a small dock and boat launch open to all. We host fishing derbies for the kids and community picnics on the shore. Lila and I were out in our little rowboat last night, watching the fireflies dance over the water. She was smiling that easy, genuine smile I thought I had lost forever. "You know, Dad," she said, "Mom would have loved this. You didn't just buy a lake. You gave everyone their home back. And that's the real secret. To defeat a bully who uses rules as a weapon, you don't just learn the rules better than they do. You buy the whole damn game and then you change it so that everyone gets a chance to play.